Hey guys, I'm Dave Otero. We're here at my place, Flatline Audio, here in Colorado, and we're going to do a little bit of a different mix lab today. I'm going to tell you how to mix all of these parts to a working XLR cable. Something that could come in handy. It's a lot cheaper to build your own cables. You can pick your own components, go as budget or high quality as you feel like you should, and get it done and feel accomplished all at the same time. So I've got a little station set up here. I'm gonna go over a few of the tools real quickly. Obviously I have my little soldering station here. You don't necessarily have to have one exactly like this. You can use like the single heat units that you just plug right into the wall. This is just what I have and it works great. I have it warmed up and I have it set at a temperature of about 350 Celsius, I believe. But since we're about to get to work, I'm gonna crank it up to about 450 Celsius and it will be warm or at that temperature in just a minute. I have this little guy here. I think they're called like a handy helper or something like that. This one honestly is really terrible. It's not heavy enough. It's a little too small for work with a cable. It might work for smaller components, but I get by with it. I would suggest if you're picking up stuff for making your own cables to get something a little heavier duty. I've put a few rubber bands around this to keep it from sliding around the table as much, and that helps a little bit. I have solder. I have a pair of wire snips that also have like some small gauge wire strippers and a bit of like a plier guy on the end there. I use this probably the most. I do have a pair of scissors. I think I didn't say that yet. And I have a couple other tools here that I might not always use, but they're handy to have around. A pair of angle pliers, some like real deep needle nose pliers, and a pair of angle snips for trimming edges if I need. I also have some of my other ingredients of this cable, if you will. I have some balanced, a pre-cut length of balanced a Redco cable. This is their low LO-Z1 cable, just a balanced cable. I think this is about 20 feet. That's probably what I default to. And then I have in this bowl here both my male and female XLR connector pieces. So we'll kind of show those as they come. And then the last pieces of those would be the boots, which I've set in front of me so I don't forget to put them on. And that's actually how we're going to start this off. So we're going to grab our ends of the cable. I'll just drop the rest of it right there. And as soon as you cut your lengths, you're going to want to take your boots and go ahead and put them on now. If you get your ends all soldered up and you realize that your boots aren't installed, you'll be really pissed off. So do that first. Next up, I'm going to take these snips here and start trimming away the outer rubber part of this cable. Maybe about an inch or so is what I usually do. So I'm kind of just like very lightly using the cutting tool to trim around that for the most part. And then you can usually grab it, pull it right off. We'll leave that there. Do the same to the other side. Got it. That one's just going to come off that easy. Okay, so now we can see in our wire here we have a copper shield that's wound around the whole part. You can kind of sort of untwist it and start to pull that to the side like this. You're going to want to make sure you keep the end of it nice and tight as well. Wrap it in there. So some cable will have some form of like a filler material. It's this, looks to be cotton rope here. We're just going to want to trim that. So hold it tight, trim it back. Okay, so now we have our two actual audio components. We have a red and a blue. Sometimes it could be a red and a white. Sometimes it could be a red and a black. It's pretty much always going to be a red. So we're going to remember that and it will come into play later when we're soldering these two particular connectors on the ends. So I'm going to trim these guys. I believe this is 22 gauge wire, so I'm going to the 22 slot of my wire strippers. And I just want a tiny bit out, like really just a couple of millimeters, not a lot. Pull that out. Pull that out. Okay, so now we have a wire stripped. We're going to set it here and get it ready for the next part. So I'll go ahead and do that to the other side, and we can probably just clip that part out and post. But it's the same exact process as the other side. Alrighty, and we're back. So I did that exact same trimming to the other side of the cable here, and I got them both clipped up to my little handy helper, not so handy helper. So at this point, we're working with an extremely hot soldering iron. Obviously, use extreme caution. This thing now is about 850 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe. So it wouldn't feel good to like jam it in your eyeball or anything. So don't do that. What we're going to do, I believe it's called tinning the wires. And we're just going to get some solder on them to kind of prepare them to meet their final destination with the connection. So the idea here is to get a tiny bit of solder on your soldering iron, touch that portion to the wire, and then you want to heat the wire and touch the solder to the wire, not touch the solder to the iron. The iron's already hot. You're attempting to heat the material so hot that it itself transfers that heat to the solder and it melts into itself. And once you do this, you'll kind of see how that works. You'll get your material to a point where it just sort of like soaks up the solder. So we'll do that. It's going to get a little smoky. And the other side. There we go. Clean off your gun here, your soldering iron rather. Set it down, and now we have some tinned cables. Time to set these guys aside for now. Okay, we're doing XLR cables, so these ends are kind of broken into a few different elements. There's the actual male and female pieces that you'll do your soldering to. I can kind of show those here. Then you'll have the sort of heavy-duty parts that can take the abuse that go around those. This would be the female side and the male side. Looks like I have a black one and a silver one, but that's fine. And then these parts will go on right before we complete the cables, and they act as a tensioner. It keeps the cable there so the solder joints won't have any stress put on them if the cable gets pulled, so forth. I'm going to put that most of this stuff back in my little bucket here, and we're going to start with just these pieces. I will tend to put the male side on the right and the female side on the left. There's no reason for that, but if I do it the same way every time, then there's less chance of me screwing up, you know, which terminal I solder these wires to. So 3 connections on an XLR cable. You have the shield and a red, in this case a blue. The shield goes to pin 1, the red goes to pin 2, and the blue goes to pin 3. So especially when you haven't done this a lot, double check yourself. I think on both sides of the connection, definitely on the male, if you look very carefully, we might not be able to get this on camera, but there are numbers by each pin. They're all numbered, 1, 2, 3. 1 is shield, 2 is red, 3 is blue or black or white. Before we get to connecting the wire, we're going to fill these wells, these receptacles, with a bit of solder as well. It's going to make it a little easier if we have solder in place on both pieces. So the same thing applies. You use a little tiny bit of solder on the iron that helps transfer heat from the iron to the material you're working on. And then you're looking to apply solder to that piece directly. That ensures that the solder is flowing and making a complete connection with that terminal or wire, rather than just kind of like forming a pool on top of it. So clean my iron off here on this wet sponge. Just a hair of that. We'll go right into one of these wells. Oops. And fill it up. Fill it up. And then you get high on some of this solder smoke, write a doom record. Good to go. These pins may be hot right now, so again, be careful. You just held an 850-degree iron to them. So maybe check them before you move, but at this point, I'm probably going to double check my pins because I have screwed this up before and it's no fun. So we are in the right spot. This is pin 2, pin 1, pin 3. So we know red goes to pin 2, and that's often where I like to start. I'll kind of bend the points of my cable to match where I'm going. So red first. And the idea is there should be, at this point, plenty of solder in both places. So we're going to heat the solder on the connector side until it is molten. Insert the red wire, remove the soldering iron, and let that solidify. Okay, usually takes about that long. At this point, we're just going to work our way around. We're going to go to pin 1 next, which is on the other side here. Okay, you can kind of see me fighting with my little helper here. And then last up is this top guy. So we'll kind of bend him to get him in place. And we're good. One cable down. Okay, so we'll move on to the female side of this connector now. We're kind of flipping things around since we're looking at almost a mirror image of the male side. So again, I'm going to double check. You're going to have numbers here. We probably don't need to get those in camera. They look about the same. We have pin 1, pin 2, pin 3. So pin 2 is going to be on the outside this time. And if I always put male on my right, female on my left, then I know my pin 2s, which are the red cables, the hot cables, go on the outside. And you just keep that in mind and less chance of screwing anything up. Okay, so we're kind of working in tight quarters here and you're having to maneuver yourself around. Remember, don't burn yourself. Don't touch a hot soldering iron to any other part of your cable. But let's get this red guy going. And the shield. I'm going to set this iron down while I reposition this a little bit. If I had a weightier helping hands guy here, it would make it a little bit easier. Can cut out some of this nonsense. Actually, since I'm getting kind of close up on the wire here, and I don't want to burn myself, I'm going to switch to my angle grip to hold the wire. Okay, so now we'll kind of take a closer look. You could probably actually see this better than I can at this point. And what you're looking for are generally shiny bulbs of solder. If they look really dull, it means that you could have overworked it possibly, and you may not be getting a super solid connection. So all of these look okay to me. Okay, so we've completed our soldering. At this point, you could turn the temperature down on your soldering iron if you have that ability, or turn it off if you're not doing any more cables. Typically, when I get all this stuff set up, I'm going to be doing a few, so I'll just turn it down, finish putting this one together, and then crank it up just right before I start the next one. So this would also be a good point to test your cable if you're going to do that. I don't have a cable tester. I could use like a multimeter just to double check pin 1 is going to pin 1 on either side, but I'm pretty sure I got it right, so we're not going to now. I always do recommend testing your cable with audio versus a cable you know to be of a good working order, to make sure, because you could actually pass audio, but have it be degraded in some way if you have a bad connection somewhere. So next step would be finish these puppies up. Let's take the male side. I'm going to grab one of these strainer leaf doodads, would be their technical term. The tapered edge would go towards the rest of the length of cable, and there's usually an open end. So you kind of just work it in there. On this particular connector, the strainer leaf fits into these areas on the soldered section itself. And it never really fits great. The idea is just to keep any of the outside of the connector from coming into contact with any of the joints. And then we're going to grab our male side connector, make sure we're facing the right way, and kind of line this up. You can see there's a raised section here that is going to line up with the groove on the inside of this part. Once you have everything lined up properly, there we go. Should just slide right in. And then sometimes I'll step on the trailing end of the cable, keep some tension so I can pull this up. And this piece just screws together, make sure everything stays aligned. Crank it down. I should do this in front of the camera. Nice and tight. That puts pressure on that strainer leaf, so this cable, if it gets pulled real hard, it's not pulling against your solder joints. And that is one end of a cable. Same for the other side. Okay, female side, strainer leaf, tapered end towards the length of cable. Again, similar kind of grooves. All connectors that you buy will be a little different, but it's generally the same workflow. This guy's a little easier to line up because of that square-shaped gap that obviously kind of gives you a better visual indicator. Line things up, push in, looks nice and flush. Step on that side of the cable, pull this guy up, screw them together. All right, so there it is. 2 completed ends of an XLR cable. You're going to want to test this, get your tools cleaned up. But at this point, you're pretty much ready to just get right to work, and you can just plug it into